Well, good morning, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to day one of this special webinar on the changing world of work and post-secondary students with disabilities, sponsored by Wilfred Laurier University in partnership with the Canadian Council on Rehabilitation and Work. And I'd like to begin, as we do at all public events at Laurier, by acknowledging that Wilfred Laurier is located on the traditional territories of the Haudenosaunee, Anishinaabe, and neutral peoples. This, of course, is a virtual event, and we're pleased to welcome participants from across the province and country, and of course want to acknowledge the ancestral territory of all the First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people that call this land home. My name is John Malloy. I'm the practitioner in residence in Wilfred Laurier's Department of Political Science, and I'm pleased to be the Master of Ceremonies for this special two-morning event. Each year, the Department of Political Science identifies a public policy issue that touches upon post-secondary education, the community at large, and the work of our alumni. A topic related to the pandemic was, of course, a natural fit for this year, and there was a keen interest to explore the changing world of work that has accompanied our new lockdown, distant lives. At the same time, we're very aware of the challenges faced by students with disabilities as they prepare to enter the workforce. Putting these two questions together yielded an obvious issue. What opportunities as well as challenges has the changing world of work created for students with disabilities as they leave the university setting? So today and tomorrow, you'll hear from students, experts, as well as employers as we explore this topic. To give you a very brief rundown, today we'll begin with a student panel followed by a guest speaker who's going to respond to their comments. Then it'll be your turn as we organize participants into breakout rooms to discuss some of the questions and issues raised in the session. Before going any further, a few housekeeping notes. This session is being held via Zoom. It will be recorded in an edited version posted later for those of you who want to consult it again or share it with people with your group organization or company. We ask that you keep your microphones muted, except of course for the breakout room session and the follow-up. We have simultaneous interpretation, and it's just a question of pinning it so that you can access it quite easily. And also at the bottom, there's a live transcript with the CC button that you can click on to get a transcript of today's proceedings. Now, today is a partnership between a number of groups here at Laurier, as well as the CCRW. And I'd like to begin by introducing Professor Andrea Brown, Chair of the Department of Political Science, to say a few words.
Good morning. I'm Andrea Brown, Chair of the Political Science Department here at Laurier, and it's my pleasure to welcome all of you joining us today for this important workshop. Before we begin, I'd like to extend a special welcome to our 3 students and alumni who will be sharing their experiences today, Chantel, Ezra, and Courtney Lynn, and to Dr. Arif Jaffa for joining us today. And a big thank you to John for initiating and leading this workshop, and to Jamie and Corey for all their hard work involved in organizing and planning. So welcome.
Great, thank you, Andrea. Our other partner here at Laurier, as well as Political Science, is of course the Career Development Center. And I would like to ask Corey Belanger to say a few words. Corey is a career consultant who plays a special role in advising students with disabilities, and as you heard from Andrea, has been instrumental in making today a reality. Corey?
Hi, good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for taking time to join us today. I just wanted to say welcome from myself and the Career Development Center at Laurier. I am a consultant that works very closely with our students with disabilities on campus and our alumni. So I was really grateful for the opportunity to partner with John and Andrea and get to work with Jamie and all of these wonderful folk you see on the screen here today. So thank you so much to everyone. And I'm really excited for the content over the next 2 days. So thank you so much.
Great. Thank you very much, Corey. And now it's time to move to our formal program. And I have to tell you that in developing today's event, we all agreed that we wanted to begin with students to lay the foundation for this discussion. And we're pleased to have an outstanding panel of students with lived experience who volunteered to share their perspective on this issue. To respond and provide some of his own insight, we've asked Professor Arif Jetha from the Institute of Work and Health and an expert in this field to make a follow-up presentation. So to moderate both the panel and Arif's presentation, I'd like to call on Jamie Burton, Business Development Officer with CCRW and a wonderful partner for today's event. Jamie has been a national leader when it comes to the question of how we create workplaces that are inclusive and welcoming for persons with disabilities. She's a frequent speaker, commentator, and advisor, as well as founder of Dolphin Digital Mentoring Day, which helps to bridge the gap between the talent of persons with disabilities and employers. Her own company, Dolphin Digital, has been a shining example of barrier-free hiring. Jamie has contributed a great deal to making today a reality, and I invite her to take the floor and lead us in our opening session. Jamie?
Thank you so very much, John, and good morning to everyone. And thanks, Corey and Andrea. It's a delight to be here, and wait until you hear the speakers that we have with us this morning. CCRW is proud to be part of this event as the only pan-disability national organization that is focused on the employment of people with disabilities. So we are very fortunate to have 2 mornings to talk about how COVID is impacting employment for people with disabilities, of course, with the focus on post-secondary students. And we are blessed to have with us this morning 2 alumni and a current student of Wilfred Laurier University to share their perspective, challenges, and wins in the context of COVID and our changing world. And so how is it that we would recognize what there is to learn better than to hear it from firsthand lived experiences? And so Chantal, Courtney Lynn, Ezra, thank you for making the time to be with us today. I think I would like to start by asking each of you to just share a general aspect of your perspective on your journey. Chantal, let's start with you.
Hi, my name is Chantal Hunick. I am the coordinator of organizational and spiritual life with Christian Horizons, which means that I get to speak to community groups and conferences and schools and all kinds of things like this, which is a real pleasure for me. I also do some grief counseling and support of adults with developmental disabilities in that respect. And so I earned my position in this role as I was going through for Laurier's combined master's in divinity and social work. And I just sort of, what else would you like in the introduction there, Jamie? I'm not sure where we were going.
Whatever you'd like to share, you can tell us a little bit about your journey and how you found this opportunity where you're currently working, if you'd like.
Yeah, so I was kind of going there and then got sidetracked a little bit. So this was a result of my first practicum and in my degree program. And so the reason that I am here today and the reason that I want to share with you is just the advantages that I had as a practicum student who was able to access the bursary for students with disabilities, which really set me up to showcase my skills rather than the challenges that I face. And so I'll get into more of that in depth in a little bit.
Thank you so very much, Chantal. And yes, we are excited to learn about this. I'm confident that your story is going to help us recognize the opportunity, because that's the word that you used. You used advantage. So I'm very interested in hearing more. Ezra, why don't I ask you to share a little bit of your story next, please?
Hello, my name is Ezra. I'm a 3rd year political science at Laurier, or I guess I just finished 3rd year, so I'll be going into 4th year in September. As Corey just mentioned, I've been a beneficiary of WLU's Accessible Learning Center and do enjoy working with them. They've really made they've really made Laurier an accepting place for students like myself. And I really hope that we eventually get to a point where every student with a disability can say the same.
Thank you very much. I think that it's great to hear that you've been supported, by the Accessible Learning Center, and I'm sure that they appreciate knowing that it has been of value to you. Courtney Lynn, would you like to share just a little bit about who you are and what you're doing?
Yeah, so I guess my story as it pertains kind of to this panel and everything. I was actually diagnosed with ADHD and a reading memory comprehension problem pretty late in life in comparison to most students who are diagnosed in childhood. It wasn't until grade 12. This was because I was always a straight A student, and so no one had any reason to maybe be concerned for my abilities except for my mother, who flagged it to a teacher who ended up relating to my story. And so I ended up taking an extra year in high school and an extra year in university to be able to understand my accommodations and the needs that I ended up requiring for that. And through that, I really became more of an advocate in talking about disabilities, and especially invisible disabilities, because we don't always talk about them sometimes. I was lucky enough to have these accommodations, which really supported my ability to reach my full potential in graduating summa cum laude, which I'm really proud of. It's a humble brag, but because of everything that I was able to put in place, I was able to find that success, which translated into going into the working force. I've been working in residence for the past 5 years now, which I didn't think that my disability was showing up until I moved into a new institution, and in having conversations with my supervisor, I was very open about having a disability, and she maybe highlighted a few things like, well, you're having these difficulties and everything, have you considered accommodations? And I never did, because I was always taught that the accommodations I required were for academics. I never considered them for the workplace. And I'm very fortunate that I had a supervisor who was knowledgeable enough, at very least, to connect me with the right people so that I had the supports that I needed for my day-to-day work, so I wasn't burning myself out.
Wow, excellent. I'll let you do that humble brag any day. That's awesome. That's excellent. I love the way that you did that too. I'll be mindful of that for another opportunity when someone's reticent to share just what they have accomplished in life. So just hearing a little bit about your stories, I'd like to focus in on a few things within the context of what we're doing today. And I'm wondering, Chantal, if you would be able to comment on, what was the process like as far as, was the school life, was that more accommodating, or was the process to attain employment, or now that you were in the workplace, how has that been for you, and describe a little bit of that journey?
Sure, yeah. Well, like Courtney Lynn was saying, like the challenges that we face in school don't necessarily disappear in the workplace. And so I guess just to give a little bit of my background, since I'm not sure if you're seeing this virtually, but my physical challenges, if we were in person, they're very obvious. I use a power wheelchair. What a lot of employers and anyone else that I interact with don't see right off the bat is that I have a fairly substantial visual impairment. And so if I were to work in the workplace without certain accommodations like assistive technology, screen readers, enlargement software, and those kind of things, those would be significant barriers. But as I mentioned previously, benefiting from the bursary for students with disabilities in the employment setting meant that my student placement supervisors and my future employers were then set up to purchase all that technology on my behalf, so that I was able to put my best foot forward. I also had my educational assistant or support person accompany me for parts of my practicum, so that they could support me in some of the administrative tasks that I'm not able to do independently. And so that really allowed my current employer to see the skills that I could execute on my own and the things that I would need support with ongoing. And so to tailor my position accordingly. And so kind of as I earned my place there as a student that came along with funding, that gave them the opportunity to see the advantages of kind of keeping me on staff and ensuring that I didn't go elsewhere. And so now I've been there for almost 8 years. And what I've found as a result of COVID is that although I'm definitely able to function in a workplace, it's easiest for me to function in my home environments where I don't have to, like things are already set up for me as perfectly as they can be, right? All the structural physical modifications have already been made. And then the other advantage of COVID, which I wouldn't have named prior to this experience, but is that prior to the pandemic, the most stressful part of my life and my day even was having to book accessible transportation, having to hope that they showed up and hope that they got me where I needed to go on time. And so while I look forward to going back to the office at some point after COVID, I also really appreciate that employers now know the advantages of working virtually, and it saves me a lot of physical energy and a lot of mental stress. Not having to worry about leaving the house and doing that quite so intensively or so frequently.
Wow, that's excellent to hear. And thank you for sharing all of that. You presented so many ideas that I think we're going to hear RF share with us further in a few moments, specifically about the tools and the accommodations that you were provided and that helped then others see what you were capable of doing with the right support. So I'm wondering, Ezra, then if we can continue that theme a little bit and then maybe expand on it, what do you think is the opportunity for learning in COVID?
Well, I think there are several, but one of them for sure is the consideration for others. I think many people who do not have a learning disability might not have had to consider requiring accommodations until they all of a sudden have to learn from home, where they might be one of 4 people on the internet, and therefore there's a little bit of choppier connection or what have you. So I think the biggest learning opportunity in COVID is the consideration for others and how that might allow people to become more open-minded, whether or not we go back to what we're used to, I guess what we would call normal. And there are other small factors as well. I think Chantel's point about transportation was a very strong one. Even sometimes as students who might have a part-time job, right, making sure that their shift ends right at the exact time so they can get to class, or again, maybe catching the right bus, or making sure that they have enough gas in their car to get to class. So just the little things as well. But I would say the consideration for others is definitely the largest learning opportunity.
Wow, thank you for that. You know, it's a very poignant thought to consider that a timetable impacts transportation or vice versa, and recognizing that in this, we've all become more considerate of what each other needs in order to just be able to do the everyday. I think that's probably one of the most poignant things I've heard someone say with respect to COVID and our learning experiences. Courtney Lynn, I'd like to see if you could expand on that in the context of your personal experience, you know, either in the interviewing process for the job that you currently have or throughout your education. Was there sort of that nuance of understanding that it was important to recognize that people learn differently or have different work styles and habits, require different forms of communication? What's been your experience with that?
Yeah, I think it's all about communication in the sense of like actually asking each other what our needs are. That's always been where I've had the most success. When I just recently completed my master's here at Laurier, and the teaching faculty with the Masters of Education were really like, well, what do you need? What can we do? What can we change? How is our classroom style set up to help you be successful in recognizing that? And with some of the environments that I've worked in, the success that I've been able to have is when I have a supervisor who listens to what I'm saying I need, even though I'm going to be honest, like I've had a very privileged experience with my disability, in that I can get by day to day with most people not knowing. And so I also don't even know sometimes what I need and what I might be able to ask for, but because I've been open and had that communication with my supervisor who has created an environment that I can feel safe to do that we can have these discussions. I think that's the key space. And so employers are doing it more and more. We see, like, if you have any accessibility requirements for an interview, please let us know. Sometimes though, like, people are nervous to say anything before the interview. So it might be, good if people encourage that in the in-person, either, well, obviously it's going to be virtual of some sort, but having that conversation more frequently, because it also allows the individual with a disability to understand that maybe that this is a safer space. I know some people are afraid to discuss it because it might feel like it's going to be a peg against them. And so creating that environment where we can talk about it openly, where it's just we're talking about each other's needs and we're talking about how we can support each other, that is how we can engage everyone. I think anyone will benefit from that kind of conversation.
Wow. I can see now why you're very fortunate. Your employer is very fortunate. And maybe just give a shout out. Who is your employer currently, Courtney Lynn?
The one that I've had the most experience with was the Department of Residence at Wilfred, Laurier. Candace Bean, I'm going to give her a shout out. I don't believe she's here, but she's been fantastic in every step of the way. I have recently transitioned into a position called a project coordinator for pandemic recovery support. And my supervisor, Andrea Lassard, has also been really great in finding different ways to make the virtual life really work.
Wow, that's excellent. So Laurier, as an employer, so facilitates their students well, from what the three of you have said. Also, as an employer, does a great job of understanding the importance of having those conversations and recognizing the need for accommodations, for the proper tools, and to support the people that they are looking to engage in further employment. I think that's wonderful to hear. I would like to listen to the three of you all morning, but what I'm going to do now is invite Dr. Arif Jethra to share what he has based on some of what you said and some of the work that he's doing, and to also recognize that we will have a few minutes at the end there to come back to you and ask you a few more questions. Dr. Arif Jethra is a scientist with the Institute for Work and Health and an assistant professor at the University of Toronto's Dalla Lana School of Public Health. His research aims at understanding how the future of work will impact the health and labor market engagement of vulnerable workers, including youth and young adults and people living with disabilities. He's earned his PhD from the University of Toronto and holds a Master in Science from the London School of Economics and Political Science. So thank you, Chantal, Ezra, and Courtney Lynn. I will now turn to you, Dr. Jethra, and let you continue the conversation this morning. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Jamie, and thanks, Ezra, and thanks, Courtney Lynn, and thanks, Chantal, for sharing your story. I'm just going to share some slides because I think my role in this conversation is kind of geek things up and present some of the research side to kind of supplement what some of the lived experience has brought to life. So I'm going to pull up some slides. Jamie, can you give me a thumbs up if you can see the slides perfectly? Great. And just to describe myself, I am a South Asian male and I am wearing a gray shirt and I'm sitting in front of a bookshelf in my home in Toronto, Ontario. And so today I'm going to be presenting on inclusive work for the future and some strategic ideas for young people who are entering the labor market with a disability. Before I start, I want to briefly introduce my institute, the Institute for Work and Health, where I'm based. We're a not-for-profit academic institute that's affiliated with the University of Toronto, and we conduct research on the intersection between work and health. And I think what's notable about our institution is that we work collaboratively with policymakers, workers, workplaces, and a range of diverse stakeholders. And so we like to include diverse voices into our research. So in preparing for this talk, I spent a bunch of time reading a report from researchers at MIT on the future of work that was authored during the COVID-19 pandemic. And this report didn't focus on disability, but the authors present two overarching themes that I really wanted to highlight as a springboard for our discussion today. First, the authors conducted a deep dive into occupations in the United States. And what they found was that close to 2/3 of current occupations did not exist in the 1940s. And so as you can imagine, many of these new jobs have been created as a result of advancements in technology, but they've also reflected an increase in the number of service-based jobs. A second key point that I wanted to highlight that was drawn up in their report was that the authors present data to show that over the past 5 decades, the working world has become increasingly polarized. And this is because wage growth has stagnated, also because there's a hollowing out of the labor market as middle income jobs are being replaced by machines. And so the result is 2 divergent career pathways. The first pathway reflects those who can obtain occupations with higher educational requirements, offer better pay, and have stronger career prospects. The second pathway is one of low-wage work, where there are limited opportunities to grow. So as we think about the future, the concern is that people with disabilities may be excluded from job opportunities and the most optimal career pathways. And so that leads me to the question that I want to explore with everyone today, which is, in a working world that's characterized by large-scale changes and inequity, how can we strengthen the inclusivity of the working world for young people with disabilities? And so just a spoiler alert, I don't actually have the answer to this question, but I hope that through my brief talk today, we can begin this conversation. And so let's start by understanding the current employment context faced by many young people with and without disabilities. And so I think the first question we should ask ourselves is, why does promoting the employment of young people represent an important priority? And so not just young people with disabilities, but young people more broadly. So typically youth and young adults are in a transitional period where they exit educational roles and enter full-time employment. During this period, they may prepare to enter the workforce, look for new jobs, and take steps to move up within their career. As described by our panel, when you have a disability, the transition may be more complex. And many young people that we talk to that have a disability express difficulties associated with leaving more accommodating school environments to less accommodating workplaces. Of concern, the challenges during this transitional period can have an economic scarring effect and contribute to labor market difficulties that can track across a person's life. Other studies highlight that youth and young adults are also more likely to work in entry-level jobs that are often insecure. And as a result, young workers may also be more likely to face the brunt of an economic shock. For instance, during the early stages of the COVID-19 pandemic, young people were 2 times more likely to report job loss when compared to middle-aged adults. And so by supporting employment early on, we can provide a foundation for productive employment across the life course. But that can be easier said than done, especially for people with disabilities who may face challenges entering and advancing within the working world. So before I move forward, I want to briefly touch on the definition of disability that was developed by the World Health Organization and is often most utilized in research and in practice. So according to the World Health Organization, a disability is not just about a person's health, like the clinical condition, but it's how health intersects with personal characteristics like a person's age, their gender, or their race, and different aspects of their environment. So that can be their work environment, their home environment, their social environment. And based on this definition, a supportive environment may address the root causes of disability. And this is really the key to inclusivity. It's about providing equal access to opportunities and resources to address potential environmental restrictions a person may have. And so through this presentation, I'm going to highlight aspects of the work environment that may shape the employment of young people with disabilities. So let's dive into some data, and I'm not going to go too far into the data because it can be overwhelming for some, including myself at times. And so the most recent estimates from Statistics Canada indicate that up to 1/5 of Canadians live with a disability. Of those, up to 2 million are youth and young adults. So it's a pretty large proportion of young Canadians who are living with a disability. Data also show that young people who have a disability are less likely to be employed when compared to those without a disability. It's important to note that those with more severe disabilities may be more likely to face environmental challenges that intersect with their health and are less likely to be employed when compared to those with more mild disabilities. Other data from Statistics Canada show that close to 110,000 young people with disabilities report not being in education or employment, and this tends to be a marker for economic exclusion. It's important to highlight that 77% of those excluded individuals report being able to work and wanting to work. Accordingly, the data show that young people with disabilities are an untapped segment of the labor market that need to be engaged and can make positive contributions to workplaces. And I've led numerous studies on young people living with disabilities. In these studies, we consistently hear about the role of the work environment in creating challenges to employment participation. In particular, young people that we talk to report difficulties accessing diverse job accommodations. They face challenges communicating health details at work. They often report being denied a promotion or career advancement opportunities when compared to those without a disability. They discuss concerns about sustaining employment. They're more likely to report lost productivity, including missing work or working while unwell when compared to those without a disability. And I think what's most notable here is that many young people report challenges balancing work, health, and personal life. And so I could probably deliver hour-long presentations on each of these points, but I think what's important to note is that young people with disabilities begin their careers in work environments that are not often conducive to sustaining employment and advancing within a working world. And this lack of support is an important direction for policy and practice to devote more attention towards. Another point I wanted to highlight, and it's a common thread that has kind of emerged in a lot of our research, is the growth of precarious work and contributing to less supportive work environments. So in a recent large survey that we conducted, we found that up to 1/3 of employed young people with disabilities indicated working precariously. And when I refer to precarious work, I'm thinking about part-time and temporary contract work where there's no union representation and where an employee reports low control over their working situation. A prime example of this is the growth of gig work. And so the implications of precarious work can be significant for people with disabilities. Those working precariously will be less likely to be offered job accommodations, health benefits, or sick leave. And the unpredictability associated with precarious work can also contribute to stress and poor mental health that may add to the employment challenges a person may face. But we know things are changing, and they're changing fast. The future of work has the potential to give rise to new working conditions, increase precarious work, as well as economic exclusion, and widen inequities within the labor market. And so when I talk about the future of work, I'm referring to the large scale and rapid digitization and automation of diverse domains of working life. And it's not just about technology. Our research shows that the future of work is all demographic, political, and environmental changes, which I'll discuss more in following slides. But I think the important thing to note is that the future of work reflects a dramatic change to every industry, and it has the potential to transform all aspects of work, including the types of jobs that are available and the ways we work. And these changes can have both a positive as well as an adverse effect for young people living with a disability. So in discussions on the future of work, it's clear to see that technology will shape employment conditions. A lot of attention has been directed towards the digital transformation of the economy as a significant driver of change. And so we often hear about the Internet of Things, smart sensors, cloud computing, virtual reality, augmented reality, 3D printing, robotics, and blockchain technology. There's also been an increasing discussion on artificial intelligence and machine learning, with workplaces deploying computerized systems to replicate human intelligence and behaviors. And while these are all diverse technologies, they're resulting in hyperconnectivity between people, businesses, digital devices, and data. They're also rapidly changing the way jobs are performed and the requirement for humans to work alongside machines. And so the impact of technology can contribute to the two diverging career pathways that I described in the introduction of my presentation. Firstly, technology can have an adverse impact on employment. For example, the advancement of digital platforms has facilitated gig work, which could be more precarious. Also, the growing application of artificial intelligence can lead to the automation of work, where repetitive jobs will continue to be replaced by machines. And we can think about self-checkout counters being replaced, self-checkout counters replacing cashier types of jobs. Over time though, as certain technology advances, it's expected that more complex job tasks may be automated. As a result, there could be competition for both entry-level and professional jobs as a result of technology. Also, there's a risk that available entry-level jobs will be those that pay less and have unpredictable physical demands. And these types of jobs may be more challenging to automate. So we can think about nursing aides in a long-term care setting as an example of a job that could be more likely to be available as an entry-level route for individuals. At the same time, technology could also be associated with opportunities, and these are important to highlight. Obviously, the advancement of different technologies will contribute to productivity gains and the development of new occupations. Different technologies could also be leveraged to create conditions that are more accessible. So we can think about smart robots in a manufacturing sector that could enable a person to take on more cognitive demands while relying on a robot for the physical support that they may need. Digital technology can also provide a level of flexibility that could be beneficial for people with disabilities. Also, while gig work can be seen in a negative light for some workers, it could also provide an entry point into the labor market. Furthermore, in a digitized world, workers with emotional intelligence, which cannot be replaced by a computer at this point in time, could be in high demand by employers. And this could be beneficial for workers from diverse groups who have different lived experience that they can bring to a workplace. And so we recently conducted interviews with young people living with disabilities on the future of work. And many participants in our study reflected on technology as an equalizer within the workplace. For instance, one participant noted, "I think that technology can only do so much if those technological advances are not paired with structural and institutional attitudes of accessibility. And when I look at technology advances, they seem mostly to prioritize an ethic of productivity. And so when it comes to disabled workers, technological advance. And so when we think about a working world where technology is commonplace, a challenge for employers and policymakers is to consider issues of inclusivity. We also need to consider ways to ensure that the benefits of a digital workplace outweigh the challenges. And so this is no easy task. It's also important to highlight that the future of work is not just shaped by technology. In our research, we have found that climate change, globalization, and populist sentiments are also expected to change the nature and availability of work for people with disabilities. Similarly, external shocks like a recession, a natural disaster, or as we have seen this year, a pandemic has the potential to disrupt employment and drastically change working conditions. So in a recent survey of young adults living with rheumatic disease, including juvenile arthritis, lupus, and rheumatoid arthritis, and these are populations that I commonly do research on, we found that the pandemic contributed to a significant decline in the reduction of employment. Obviously, this change in employment may have resulted from a young person choosing to stop working out of fear of a COVID-19 infection, but the change in employment could also stem from a closure of business or other policies to address occupational disease spread. And so these results help to show the fragility of employment faced by young people with disabilities in the midst of an economic shock like COVID-19. In the same study, we asked young people with rheumatic disease about the impact of COVID-19 on their work and health experiences. And I want to draw your attention to the right side of these graphs. And I think what's notable here is that over 90% of participants reported that the pandemic affected their working conditions, and close to 3/4 felt that the pandemic affected health and safety at work. And so these findings aren't surprising. Many of us experienced how the pandemic has disrupted all aspects of work. And obviously, when you have an autoimmune condition like a rheumatic disease, or are working in an industry where work from home is not possible, like retail or healthcare or education, health and safety would definitely be a concern. And I think this helps kind of show the way that the pandemic disrupted the working conditions for young people living with a specific disabling health condition. But at the same time, the COVID-19 pandemic has had some potentially positive implications. So back to our conversations with young people with disabilities, many reflected on the adaptability of employers to offer work from home arrangements in the face of the pandemic. These same young people also lamented on being denied these same accommodations in the past. So for instance, one participant noted, "During the time when I was looking for a job and I applied to places and I would ask them about options for working from home, a lot of them would say, oh no, we don't do that. But now with this virus that is happening, almost everyone is working from home. And I know a lot of those companies have employees that are working from home right now. I'm like, oh, was it because of my disability that you didn't want to hire me? Or you just weren't thinking ahead in that kind of way at that time? So overall, the pandemic has provided a roadmap for employers to make work more accessible to a broader range of employees. So it's important for us to continue to advocate employers to retain that level of accessibility that they've provided to many of us over the last year. I think it's also important to acknowledge that many Canadians, including young people with disabilities, don't work in jobs where work from home is feasible. In events like COVID-19, these disparities are brought to the forefront and highlight the importance of protections for vulnerable groups of workers. And so how do we move forward? And this is a really important question that I think we all should be engaged in. And I think the conversations over the next 2 days will definitely help us understand ways forward. So I think it's important to continue to emphasize that young people with disabilities remain an untapped segment of the labor market who have the motivation and capacity to make significant contributions to workplaces. But many face challenges as they enter the working world, and these challenges have the potential to be exacerbated in the future of work. So to move forward, I think educational institutions, employers, and policymakers all need to play a role in supporting the employment of young people with disabilities now and into the future. Importantly, I think there needs to be a greater acknowledgement of the challenges and opportunities faced by people with disabilities. Also, there should be an increased awareness of how different future of work trends may pose barriers to employment for people with disabilities. And through these insights, we may be able to inform the inclusive design of policies and programs that prevent potential disruptions. I think we also need to ensure that young people with disabilities have the technical and soft skills of the future. Academic institutions should continue to monitor the jobs of the future and offer relevant skilling initiatives. Also, employers need to invest in reskilling and upskilling existing workers. Employer-led programs can provide a mechanism to retain employees while meeting the demands of a changing working world. And we've consistently heard that obtaining access to tangible work experience through work-integrated learning and cooperative education is important for gaining access to the labor market and building employment readiness. These programs should be expanded while also taking a strategic approach to providing skills-based training that is relevant to future employment contexts and are tailored to the unique experiences of people with disabilities. And as described, it's anticipated that the working lives of many of us will become more precarious in the future. As a result, young people with disabilities could face more unstable incomes and have fewer employment protections or legislative supports. And I think we really need to think about or rethink existing income and disability support programs to reflect these evolving conditions. And so obviously these are a few ideas, and I think we'll engage in more ideas over the next few days. But to me, the future of work and the discussions on the future of work can allow us to think strategically and be more creative about potential solutions that we can implement in the present labor market so that young people with disabilities are resilient to changes in the future, are able to access emerging opportunities, and can be exposed to work environments that are inclusive. And so I'm going to leave you there. If you are interested in some of the research on the future of work and some of the themes that I've raised in this presentation, I encourage you to read a report that we recently authored and is on our website. And if you're interested, I can also send you this link so that way you don't have to just write it down. And I'll give my contact information in the final slide. Also, I want to put a quick plug in some research that we're currently doing. And so we're actively pursuing research on the future of work. And currently we're talking to policy experts, labor market specialists, disability employment service providers, as well as young people with and without disabilities about their thoughts and perceptions on the future of work. So if you're interested in participating, please let me know. I'd like to finally acknowledge our funders through the Government of Canada, as well as the Arthritis Society, and my research team at the Institute for Work and Health. And here's my contact information. And I encourage you to reach out to myself or sign up for some of our e-alerts at the Institute for Work and Health. And I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have about my research or about some of the work that we're currently engaged in. So I thank you again, and I look forward to some questions.
Wow, excellent. I'm so glad that I'm able to be part of this morning and hear this presentation from you. Thank you so very much, Dr. Jetha. There were some interesting elements in there that had me thinking about how I do things and how as an employer there is consideration for that adaptability or that flexibility. But I'm really interested in knowing how Ezra, Chantel, and Courtney Lynn picked up on any things that resonated with them. So if the three of you are able to join us back on camera again, I'd just like to first start with you, Courtney Lynn. Was there something in there that resonated with you as part of your journey from education to employment and some of the things that you've been experiencing that you say, yeah, that's an important part of when we consider that transition piece?
Yeah, I think it's the openness to do the change. I think that quote that you shared about the individual who didn't get the accommodations that they had asked for working from home, and then now it's happening. And so many times we see different things of like, well, we probably could have done that if we maybe just were a bit more open to change. And I think sometimes like most people are not requesting the biggest change or for you to completely do something different. We need to just I think even as a society as a whole, as we're working, is we need to be open to change. We need to try new things. And some places are so proud of their innovation, yet they don't innovate the simplest aspects of the day-to-day work life. And that can be, I think for me, what I've really learned from COVID as well is the changing hours. Like, it's now more flexible so that people can go and pick their kids up from daycare or school or teach their kids now at school, and being more flexible with what we can do and finding those ways to work together is something that I've been very fortunate that I've had people who have been okay with that, but I know that some of my peers who have experienced very different working experiences don't always get that. And so, yeah, that flexibility and being able to be open to just what are new ideas? What does the technology allow us to do? Can we make this feasible and available for people?
Being open. I love that. Thank you so much, Courtney Lynn. Ezra, what about you? Do you have anything particular that jumped out at you and said, yeah, that's what I was thinking?
Well, the first one was the job loss, because that hit hard for me. But with regards to the presentation, I thought similar to what Courtney Lynn said, the openness of workplaces. One thing that Courtney Lynn mentioned before the doctor gave that presentation, and then another thing that was also mentioned during it, was that workplaces are more open to accommodating. And I think now it is a little bit more real. So what do I mean by that? Well, I think previously a lot of employers or people who might have gone into an interview, when they were given the opportunity to discuss their accommodations or disabilities, felt that it was something the employers were doing to just check off the box, right? Something that, let's just get this done and over with part of the interview, we'll say it at the beginning, and then move on to the actual interview. Given the pandemic, and now that people are more likely to ask for an accommodation, I think now it has become more real and more genuine. And that's something that I think will be a huge advantage moving forward.
Wow, thank you for that. I agree with you 100%. There is that tendency to recognize the moment, to be more genuine. First of all, because the demand is requiring it. We all need to have that consideration for how we're working right now. Chantel, was there something specific that resonated with you personally?
Yeah, I think some people have mentioned the quote that RF used about the workplace accommodations now being more feasible. And I think there's a lot of grief associated with COVID being around. Why didn't we learn this stuff before? Quite honestly, I don't know why we didn't learn this before. I don't care why we didn't learn this before. If we can just carry it forward into the new world that we're being given, like the post-COVID world, whatever that looks like, that will be very, very encouraging for employees with disabilities and employees in general. I think what COVID has done for me has proven that the accommodations that I need are not so specialized, right? Like now everyone needs to work from home, and now everyone needs to have flexible hours, like Courtney Lynn has said. And so if I can just speak to students for a moment, knowing what you can and cannot do and having a practicum-based degree will help you to get kind of a foot in the door. Speaking to employers, for a second, being a little bit more open-minded about not just the qualifications that you think you require, but the different applicants you have for the job and the ways that they could benefit your work in ways that you're not expecting. And in terms of policy making, recognizing that disabilities don't just go away. And so we need to think not only for equipping people to get an education, but ways to utilize that education in the workforce is just as important.
Well, thank you, Chantal. I do believe that you just touched on solutions from all perspectives of what we're looking at this in the context of that transition from school to employment and what's needed. And it is that collaboration between those in the community that are looking for that employment opportunity, the students that are graduating and looking to utilize the skills that they've been taught, recognizing that businesses must remain flexible to ensuring that there are accommodations provided, and then understanding that policy development does have an impact because it often helps stimulate or guide some of our decisions. I think in that context, what I'd like to ask you, Arif, is a question about a point that you mentioned, and then quickly have each of our participants comment on it. But where do you see experiential learning in the future?
Yeah, like I think Chantal actually was pretty accurate in her representation of it. I think it's an important entry point into the working world, and it could provide young people with an understanding of what it takes and also the types of adaptations they need to make and what they need to advocate for when they enter the working world. And given the fact that work is going to become more precarious and harder to find, I think just in general, getting a leg up in getting opportunities and understanding what it takes, I think is just a critical aspect of the transition to work. So that would be my thoughts on it. And I think it's important for universities to continue to collaborate with employers to identify opportunities where they can provide these types of learning opportunities, because they're critical in making sure that new graduates find work and are successful in the working world. And I think also, just to re-emphasize my point about skills of the future, I think we need to really think about this. And obviously the government of Canada has directed a lot of attention towards upskilling and reskilling workers, but are those initiatives tailored to the needs of people with disabilities? And I think we need to have that conversation a bit, because we're acknowledging that skills of the future are important, but obviously not everyone has access to skills training in the same way. And I think we need to consider that a little bit more.
Excellent, thank you. Courtney Lynn or Ezra or Chantal, would you like to, anyone respond to that context of experiential learning and understanding how much that means? Courtney Lynn?
Yeah, I think it's something that's so much valuable, and it's something that even myself, I've always said too. I learned a lot more about myself and my skill sets from my work that I did during my undergrad. I was a community advisor in residence, and it's what got me obviously on the path that I am on. But I didn't have a co-op as part of my undergrad or placements, and it's not always something I was really interested in. And I think that's something that's unique that universities can offer, in recognizing that university is more than just the education. There's so much more pieces, and the whole point and why we started universities, looking way back in the history and all that, but it's about the skill sets and preparing them to go out into the communities and be contributing citizens in some extent. And so we need to think of different ways that we can build those skills in students, not just through their academics, but in other meaningful ways. And maybe it's more co-op or it's placements, but maybe it's also opportunities for additional learning in how they can make sense or reflection on the additional experiences they're doing, those part-time jobs, and, like to help pay for their university. How can that maybe, help them grow even further? Looking at those little pockets is what we can definitely do.
Excellent. So Chantal, I'm very much aware of the time, so I'm going to ask you to share, and then we'll go to Ezra too, and then I'll summarize. So go ahead, Chantal.
Yeah, thanks. So the way, if I were to enter the workforce on my own and kind of not have the employment supports and not have disclosed my challenges to my employer, I think I would have fallen flat on the first or second day. It took me a lot of trial and error to figure out what worked and what didn't, and what was efficient for my or useful to my employer and what was not. And so having like 2 heads are better than 1, 3 heads are better than 2. So being able to do that stuff in collaboration with the Accessible Learning Center and my equal opportunity employer was a lot better than just kind of applying for a random job on my own and hoping that I made it. The technology grants that I received initially and the workplace supports that I received only initially were the way of making myself equally competitive to an employer who didn't have my challenges. And once they saw that, once they had the vision or the experience that it was possible, it became a lot easier to justify and then increase my employment accordingly.
Excellent. It's equally competitive. I really like that. Thank you, Chantel. And Ezra, for you?
And going back to the experiential learning element of it, I think it'll now be more valued. I think it's something, as somebody who also had an amazing residence experience, at first it might be something that you roll your eyes at, then you show up to it and you think, this is awesome. Well, unfortunately now some people don't have the same opportunities to experience the learning that I did. So I think coming out of this, it'll be a lot more valued, and I think people will recognize that. And even if they're not in residence, if they're suggesting they do it next year or in the future, well now, to say that we'll be online is a perfectly reasonable suggestion to make them experience learning now. So I think experiential learning will be very, very much valued even more in the future.
And I agree so much. And I could listen to the three of you continue to share with us. And Dr. Jetha, I just want to thank all of you, Chantel, Ezra, Courtney Lynn, and Arif this morning. That has been fantastic. We've learned a lot. There's some repeating themes here, I would suggest, but I may just go out and get a t-shirt that says, we don't do that, or at least that's what we used to say. So with that,
I want the t-shirt.
I thank you so very much, and great to have you with us. And I will thank you. And John, I'm going to turn it back over to you.
Great. Thank you very much, Jamie. And let me echo our thanks first to the student panel. It was so important that we hear from students, and we start with the experience of students to really lay the foundation. Dr. Jetha, thank you very much for 2 things: for taking time to come here to, virtually to present your very, very important research, but also thank you for your ongoing work in this field. It's so important. And it's so crucial that we have people who are looking at the facts and the statistics and doing the research to help guide all of us. So thank you for your leadership in that. And thank you, Jamie, for being a wonderful moderator today and leading the discussion and engaging the students and Dr. Jetha. So now it's your turn. Our plan is to put together a series of breakout rooms where you'll have a chance to address, and we have sort of 3 questions to guide these discussions. The first is, what surprised you the most about the presentations today? The second, what opportunities do you see the new world of work creating for students with disabilities? And the third, what can post-secondary institutions, community groups, and employers do to better prepare students to benefit from these opportunities? In terms of housekeeping, my understanding is we'll be setting up a number of breakout rooms. You'll be assigned randomly. There will be a group that will stay back. So the main screen will form a breakout room. And anyone who needs the use of the interpreter, that interpreter will stay in the main breakout room. So even if you're assigned, just hit no, or that you don't want to go to a breakout room, and you can join the group that'll be on the main screen. So thank you all once again. Now, as we go through this transition to, I don't know, have a little bit of a lighter break, we wanted to share with you a commercial from CCRW on, the topic that we're discussing today. So I think with the magic of whoever's running the technology, we'll have a brief commercial and then we'll organize you into the rooms.
Okay, Mel, go ahead. Thanks, John.
So, Taylor, what did you want to chat about?
I was just thinking about when we get back to in-person. The accessible washrooms are just kind of old, and so...
Hey, what's up? I'm Fear, and I gotta say, careful there, buddy. You don't want to seem different, do you?
I mean, it's actually okay, I guess.
Taylor, if there's something we could be doing better, I'd love to know.
Easy, Tiger. Don't want to say the wrong thing, right? I've got HR on speed dial.
Wait, I should just double check what I'm supposed to be doing here, you know? I just want to dot my I's and cross my T's, you know?
Honestly, it's fine. I'm fine. Everything's fine.
You know, I should probably talk to HR or send this to head office. I should check our internal policy. Yes, that is what I should do.
Honestly, I don't even know why I asked to talk to you. We're good. Thank you so much for your time, and also goodbye.
Our policy's in here somewhere. I know I can find it.
I'm just gonna leave this meeting immediately.
What? No, Taylor, I'm a good person, okay? Just don't you worry, 2 to 3 weeks tops. I will figure out what to do here, you know? I found our PPE policy if you want to know about that.
Goodbye for now. Or for forever? I don't know.
Taylor!
Oh, loved that. So, what's next?
I don't have time for you, Fear. I need to do better for Taylor. I need to deep dive into every resource I have and figure out exactly what to do.
Well, now I'm scared.
Out.
Okay.
Don't let fear stop you from creating an accommodating and inclusive workplace. CCRW can help. Go to aim@ccrw.org or call 1-800-664-0925 extension 384 for more information.
Great. Thank you, Jamie and Jamie and your team for sharing that with us. It's a wonderful ad. So at this moment, I think we're ready for breakouts. Corey's our technical leader here. As I said, one of them will stay back. So if you are interested in using the interpretation, the interpreter will be staying back in that room. So Corey, I think we're in your hands. For those who have joined us, we were in the main breakout room, and Susan's raised some excellent points, which I think you heard as you were coming in, about those that perhaps the voices are not being heard, well, Arif, do you want to pick it up on sort of what the research being done on those that are being left out?
Yeah, so I think personally in our institution, our goal is to include people with lived experience at the early stages of the research process. And so ultimately when findings are made available, those are the voices that we are reflected in our research. And then when we conduct engagement with policy leaders and practitioners, that those lived experiences are brought to the forefront so that we can use them as a platform to help change existing programs and policies. And like Susan mentioned, there is a shift in Canada right now with the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities being implemented, but there's still so many steps that need to be taken to ensure a society that's free from barriers and where people can participate in life in ways that are similar to all other Canadians. And so I think Susan's point is one in which we need, it's kind of like an aspirational objective. I think we need to work towards making sure that the lived experience is at the forefront, and we use that to help form policy and practice. And so John, I'm appreciative of the fact that you invited students with lived experience to talk about this issue, and they led off the conversation, because I think that's critical. And like Susan mentioned, disability is not a homogeneous group. There's so many people with different types of disabilities, and then it intersects across your gender and your race and where you live. And your socioeconomic status. And I think that's also another important point, that people have different experiences, and we need to understand that as well.
Great. Well, thank you. And I know, Susan, we just sort of scratched the surface of a number of issues that you raise, and I'm glad that the group got to hear sort of at least the second part, the entire group. And that's what we want to do in the remaining few minutes. We're going to be back again tomorrow, as you know, but is hear other comments from the groups. If I can just, as well as Susan's comments that you heard, I think we had a very interesting conversation in our group where we were talking about this division on accommodations. I thought it was a very interesting observation that, you know, in the university sector, we talk about accommodations for students, et cetera, and there is this kind of, you know, whether it's an underlying overt or implicit message, well, you may get that at university, but not in the quote unquote real world or the world of work. And all of a sudden we are being confronted with, pleasantly, I guess, that we are looking at a new world of work, and we will have more opportunities for students to find those accommodations as they enter the world of work. And of course, the sort of latter part of our discussion was on the whole role of employers, obviously in terms of policies, but I think also the idea of creating a culture where employees, even at the interview, potential employees at the interview stage, are able to engage in an open discussion about their disability, about what accommodations might look like, and if they are hired, to carry on that discussion. I think that advertisement really hit home for a lot of people, that you need to overcome the fears, and a lot of it is just openness and dialogue. So that was a very quick, I mean, we obviously talked for about 10 or 15 minutes, but I'll ask other groups to report back. Jamie, do you want to, we've sort of designated people as facilitators. So Jamie, do you want to tell us about your group?
Actually, I was somehow with someone with Emily McIntyre, so I'll let her do it. She was there the whole time, but yeah, thank you, John.
One theme that kept recurring in our group is that the importance of having stories, and that you can't fully understand a situation until you create space for people to talk about their stories. In terms of what needs to be done in school settings, the importance of experiential learning, and then for employers, that the importance of creating a baseline of accessibility, so that in the initial stages that people will be wanting to apply for jobs, and that you have to accommodate all groups, and not in a responsive way, but in a proactive way.
Great. Other reports back, reports back, I'm not sure. Andrea?
Sure, I can report back from my group. We had a long discussion on the first question because there were so many interesting things that came up, both from the students and from RF's talks that were quite eye-opening and interesting. Both the positive experience that the students and alumni had at Laurier with accessible learning, but also you know, on the more negative side, how difficult it is to find employment, and how such a large number of people ready to work, you know, 75% are not able to get these positions. In terms of the second point, it was really brought home and how there's been a big opportunity opened by this pandemic that has shown how clearly accommodations can be made when there is willingness. And so this is really a point where the voice of people with disabilities needs to be heard, because we're very aware right now that these big changes can be made. And even, you know, one of the things that someone pointed out was that a lot of the changes that are needed are not actually all that big. They're quite small, easy to do things that could be simply put in place. And we wrapped up our conversation talking about how there really seems to be a need for greater recruitment, both in education sectors and in the workplace, of people with disabilities, in an attempt to sort of go out and target opportunities for people.
Wonderful. And certainly we touched too on experiential learning in our group as well as yours. Are there other, I'm getting all the groups and facilitators. Does someone else want to volunteer who is a facilitator? Megan?
Yeah, sure. And I would echo that the theme of the importance of experiential learning, was discussed throughout in our group. Specifically, the surprise that how impactful it can be and is to enhance the student experience, and really the importance of it workforce and workplace. So, knowing that as both a surprise, but also an opportunity to do more and to do better. Also, when we talked about sort of the surprises, throughout the presentation, it was brought up around, I think in RF's presentation, emotional intelligence, being in high demand, and, not thinking of that before because it's such a human element, but that's a great way to be innovative and for employers to be innovative. So we were talking about the opportunities, sort of, moving forward. Experiential learning, of course, it came up again, but also the consideration for others and what Ezra shared during, his time, and, really just breaking it down to the consideration of, transportation and the impact that it has, from getting one place to the other, but also the opportunities that the consideration for others can open up. And we also talked about, really that significant push since the passing of the Accessible Canada Act and, the design of processes and policies, to be inclusive and, while there is negative impacts, through COVID-19, looking at the opportunities for the disability community and advocates to move forward with more inclusive design and workplaces and sort of access. So what that, no, we don't do that, but yes, now we do, and the impact that can have across the board is really important. And as we were just getting pulled back into the plenary, an interesting question was raised around, the kinds of work opportunities in the future of work and the precarious working or employment and how that will greatly impact us. But, when we look at the stats of people with disabilities in specific positions, we use the university was used as an example, sort of like contract faculty and, the number of people with disabilities in specific positions, like, is it a pipeline issue or is it, the access to talent? And we got cut off at the end of that question. So I'm eager to tap back into the individual who was raising that question so we can tackle it again, hopefully maybe tomorrow, but I'll wrap it up there.
Great. Thanks. Now I'm getting back here. Oh, there we go. Okay, I think we're in good shape. Now, do we have one more room, Corey, or we've covered all the report backs? That's wonderful. Now, what I would love to do is open it up for a general discussion, but I'm also conscious of the fact that we promised 90 minutes on each day, respecting people's schedule and also respecting the fact that Zoom is exhausting, and 90 minutes we thought was a great time frame. So I'm gonna cut it off, the old line about leave them wanting more, and I hope that we can pick up some of this tomorrow. And also, please, if you're looking at getting in touch with the different speakers and those who presented today, we can certainly facilitate that to continue the conversation. And as we'll talk about tomorrow, we hope this isn't a one-off. We want to continue this discussion and maybe have a few minutes tomorrow to talk about where we go from here. So in terms of wrap up, I want to echo the thanks again for everyone that was involved today, our guest speaker, Arif, our wonderful student panel, all the facilitators, Jamie and Corey and Andrea, who've done such a great job in helping to organize today. And of course, all of you for coming out. In terms of tomorrow, we will be meeting again at 9:30. It's the exact same Zoom link. So very, very straightforward. And today was, we started by talking about some of the problems and issues, and we're sort of starting that transition into, hey, what are some of the solutions? But, as you heard as we were wrapping up, there's still a lot of the breakout rooms. There's still a lot outstanding. So tomorrow we're going to hear from the employer side, and we have a very special guest speaker, Jason Bromett, who's the head of modern workplace and security with Microsoft Canada. So he'll be sharing his perspective as an employer on this very, very important question. We'll have time for breakout discussions again, and then carving out a little bit more time for a general discussion of a report back, and also some thoughts from you as to where we go from here or a next step. So once again, thank you all. 11:04, we almost did it, but I know I want to respect people's schedules. Thank you all. Have a great day, and we look forward to seeing you tomorrow for part 2.